morning, disruptors. Well, it's 11:45. We're right before lunch. I'm going to keep this short. The carbon markets are broken. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Now, I'm just kidding. They gave me 15 minutes, so buckle up. If you're sitting in this room, you're probably already aware of the fact that the carbon markets are broken. But let me ask you this question. What are you going to do about it? That's what we're here to talk about today. Disrupting the SH*T out of the carbon markets. By the way, when submitting this topic, I did not realize that I was going to have to repeat that statement multiple times throughout this talk. That was a terrible call. Disrupting the carbon markets. Before we get into that, they have given me this microphone, so I'm going to start by talking about me. I was born into a family of 4. I have 3 older brothers who are loud and opinionated. My dad would come in to diffuse many a battle between 4 kids, ages 8 to 16. He used to say to me, Jana, don't get mad at what your brothers are doing. Get curious about why they're doing it. Okay, Dad. I'm not mad that my dolls are called Barbies. I'm just curious as to why Jays are called G.I. Joes. It was this curious mentality that has led me through my career and that has allowed me to have a very interesting perspective on how to disrupt the carbon markets. One that is critical when trying to disrupt an industry that is so deeply entrenched. The energy sector, arguably the industry most impacted by this market, is also the one with the most opportunity to change it. In order to understand my perspective on the carbon markets, I have to take you back to when I was 25. I was hired to be the business development director of a small engineering firm here in Calgary. I'm 29 now, so if you're doing quick math, the year was 2019, and you know exactly where this is going. One day, we had a relatively full pipeline of facilities and greenfield projects, and the next, the COVID-19 pandemic hit and everything ground to a halt. I didn't get mad, definitely got a little scared, and I got very curious. How and where in the world was I going to find work for these 60 engineers? I started to look into integrity budgets. Efficiencies, optimizations, management of change, you get the picture. With that integrity budget in mind, I started to look into the Australian market. And I met with companies there who valued our Canadian expertise, and they appreciated the fact that as midstreamers and producers, they could stretch that dollar further. Oh, that's me. It was through these interactions that I was introduced to the voluntary carbon market. These Australian companies were prioritizing this efficiency budget because they were generating voluntary carbon credits, profiting from them, and using that profit to recession-proof their overall operations. This is something that specifically at that time, I found to be acutely interesting. With this newfound knowledge, I brought this back to our Canadian clients and I pitched it. I pitched the system, to which the majority of them said, no thank you. Absolutely not no thank you, way too risky. I didn't get mad, I got curious. And here's what I learned over the next 6 months. The key performance indicators on what makes a good use of ESG spend is not one size fits all, and it's highly driven by internal motivators. Let me put this in another way. On Saturdays, my dad would round up his team of kids, load up the dirt bikes, and take us down to McLean Creek. We would always stop at 7-Eleven on the way, and he would give each of us a $5 bill. Our task, go into 7-Eleven, buy something that makes you happy, and something that you're not going to fight over on the drive down to McLean Creek. No problem. My capital spend was $5. My use of spend was to be inside the confines of this 7-Eleven. Now, my motivator was a salty snack. I was a fan of the hot dog and chips combo. My nickname growing up was Big Mac. That's neither here nor there. My brother Jay's motivator was to become popular amongst the grade 7 girls that following Monday. So he would walk out with a giant bag of 100 5-cent Frogger candies. This concept is theoretically similar to what I viewed in terms of ESG spend in the voluntary carbon markets. 2 spends, $5, $5. 2 of the same use of spend within the confines of this industry or this sector. My motivator caused me to buy 2 things of high value. My brother Jay's motivator caused him to buy 100 things of lower value. Neither of these two things are morally good or morally bad. They're just a different motivator that introduces a different use of spend. This will make sense in a minute. So 6 months after quarantined business development, I started my first company. And so I've always had the distinct privilege of viewing carbon as an opportunity. In order to understand this, in order to understand the opportunity of carbon, we have to understand where we are and how we got here. The first wave of the carbon markets are what I like to call the early days of good intentions. They came from the Kyoto Protocol in 1997, and this was where governments from around the world collected with the goal of putting a price on carbon. They created standards like the Clean Development Mechanism, or the CDM. So what went wrong? Loopholes, big ones. Big companies found ways to generate profit from voluntary offsets without ever actually touching their on-site emissions. The second wave, post-Paris Agreement, aims for more transparency, greater verification standards, and the concept of additionality. Ooh, I forgot. I was doing so good. But it still falls short. Why? Because the market is reactive. The carbon markets were built for compliance, not innovation. Energy companies are forced to respond to changing regulations as opposed to shaping them. So let's talk about the current state of carbon credits. You've all heard the criticisms from The Guardian, not this Guardian. You've all heard the criticisms. Buy some offsets, plant some trees, fund this renewable energy facility, and voila, your emissions are neutralized. It's time that we start to rethink the way that we view this market. In the same breath as we commend a renewable energy project developer, we crucify a carbon credit purchaser for shafting their obligation and taking a shortcut. Well, guess what? Without that credit off-taker, that renewable energy facility would never reach financial investment decision, and that renewable energy would never reach our grid. So let me ask you this. Raise your hand if you can think of, let's say, a carbon capture facility that has been shelved in the last few years because they couldn't make the economics work. It's time to stop focusing on the flaws within the voluntary market and start recognizing offsets for what they are. A critical tool for supporting projects that drive genuine emission reductions. It's not about avoiding responsibility, and it's not about creating a shortcut. These projects require off-takers, and it is nothing but commendable when companies choose to voluntarily invest in them. Dang it, Gord, don't look me in the eyes. Shoot. When we choose to voluntarily invest in them. Shoot. Well, oh well, I'll ad-lib. And here's a reminder. Voluntary carbon credits, high-integrity voluntary carbon credits, are not a shortcut. It doesn't take a short period of time. It takes a really long time. It takes capital, it takes government, it takes technology, it takes engineers, third-party validators. It's really hard to do. Trust me, I've done it. So plain and simply, here's where the energy sector has fallen short. We're being reactive instead of proactive. We wait for governments to set the rules. We wait for regulations to change. We wait for mandates to be imposed on us. When we have the knowledge, the skills, the resources, and the capabilities to do more. And I'm not talking about 20,000 tier credits. Since when has this industry ever been satisfied with 20,000 of anything? Maybe 20 million BOE per day. But see, even just then, I just criticized a company for taking the steps to generate 20,000 offsets, when that is 20,000 steps in the right direction. And we're seeing glimpses of this progress. through the carbon capture, utilization, and storage facilities that are getting across the finish line. The technology is there. What's missing is the infrastructure that allows for carbon to flow through the economy like capital. So how do we do this? How do we disrupt the SH*T out of the carbon markets? You start by de-risking your own entry into the voluntary carbon markets. Before ever putting a shovel in the ground, you use your knowledge of motivators and key performance indicators, and you identify a long-term voluntary off-taker whose ESG use of spend meets your value criteria for your voluntary off-take. In doing this, you have created your own market and you've de-risked your project. It's time for the energy sector to start treating carbon like the asset class that it was first intended to be through that first wave of the carbon markets, a tradable, valuable asset. The energy sector has the ability to generate high-integrity voluntary carbon credits. We have the ability, the resources, the knowledge, the skills, and the tools to go beyond compliance obligations and generate carbon credits that are worth taking credit for. When we do this, we will see increased demand, and here's why. We're Canadian, for the most part, I'm assuming. We're Canadian and we're competitive. This is one of the things that the Australians love about us, that and our very inappropriate use of swear words. I'm gonna bet that if we take note of the companies that are doing this, that are playing in this space, that are doing it really well, and that are profiting from it, because there are some, that more of us are gonna start doing this. We're gonna start doing it well, and we're gonna start profiting from it. And then guess what? We're all going to start doing this. Why? Because we're competitive. We're competitive in this industry. We've always had to be. Not only do we want to be the best in the whole world, in the whole sector, we also want to be the best amongst ourselves. So we will see a drive in demand for voluntary emission reductions. And then that will cause for a drive in supply of emission reductions in the form of high-integrity voluntary carbon credits. This will create a global impact. The energy sector has always been a driver of innovation. So is it going to be as easy as I'm making it sound? No. Is it going to be contractually sophisticated? Yes. Does this sector have extreme experience in contractually complicated, sophisticated, long-term offtake agreements? Yes. I'm looking at you, Rory. If we can get oil out of sand, we can make this market work for us. It's time for the energy sector to take ownership over the voluntary carbon markets. Secure our own demand by creating long-term, high-quality off-takers whose ESG requirements meet our voluntary credit portfolio. It's time for us to create global impact and bring that revenue back into our economy. Quite frankly, it's time that we stop reacting and start disrupting. Thank you.
Thank you, Jana. Next time I should check the actual title of the talk with the speaker so I know how to pronounce it. SH*T. Thank you for that challenge to the sector and opportunity, and really appreciate the ability to relate candy and carbon credits as well. Our final speaker before lunch is Courtney Elliott, a passionate advocate for cleantech innovation and sustainability. Courtney is a skilled funding strategist with a rich background in philanthropy and social impact. As the Director of Partnerships at Foresight, she plays a pivotal role in planning, executing, and overseeing fundraising initiatives to drive transformative projects within Canada's cleantech industry. Today, she'll share her insights on redefining acceleration, why adoption holds the key to Canada's net zero success. Please welcome Courtney Elliott to the stage.
Everyone, nice to meet you. My name is Courtney Elliott, and like was shared, I am going to be speaking about redefining acceleration. So if you are here for the Calgary Stampede, you're 3 months too late, and you're now stuck with me. So without further ado, I work for an organization called Foresight Canada. We're a national nonprofit, and we are Canada's largest clean tech venture accelerator. So those are a couple power words, and hold tight, and hopefully it'll make a little bit more sense what we do throughout this presentation. Ultimately, our purpose is to help the world do more with less sustainably. But plot twist, we've been around since 2013. Since then, we've learned a thing or two about innovation. We deal with 300 to 400 ventures every single year. And what we've seen recently is that accelerating clean tech adoption is not enough to enact meaningful change towards net zero. Today, I will share why Canada will continue to fail our net zero 2030 objectives if we don't see more innovation in the sector. So, what is this adoption gap I'm talking about? What are the implications? Stifled economic growth, increased costs of doing business for ventures, for industry, for government alike, depreciating properties, and ultimately, brain drain. Again, we deal with many, many ventures. I personally talk to plenty with the IRA Act in the US and the great competitive European market. We do see a lot of Canadian ventures leaving Canada's ecosystem right now. That's not great, so let's change that. So ultimately, to reach net zero, the truth of the matter is we do need innovation. So aside from the environmental benefits that clean tech innovation serves, it's obvious, hopefully cleaner, greener air, better water, but ultimately innovation also boosts the economy and benefits Canada's trading and export activities, which benefits our daily lives. And where we stand globally, though, is not all that sunny. My main hobby is to travel. I've been to over 30 countries, spent a decent amount of time in 4 of them, but I always come back to Canada because I love it, but I don't love how we're doing on the global scale. So I'll just give you all a second to take this in and realize the impacts for yourself as it relates to your audience. Now, that's the sobering part. We're done with that. We're going to move on to a bit more optimism here. What we do well in Canada is we have very educated people. Look around, you're all very brilliant. I'm definitely the dumbest person in the room, I can assure you of that. We do have amazing green economic development. I know Canadian market is more open than most to sustainable products, which is amazing. Thank you everyone for composting. And we do, especially in Calgary, have a great entrepreneurial culture. So, the largest barrier is clean tech adoption to innovation. And I know that this Unite conference is all about being disruptive, so I'm going to say something a little bit contentious. In our 11 years of operation, we have come to understand one thing, that government is instrumental in supporting the innovation ecosystem, but they are not set up to manage the risk of supporting ventures. What I mean by that is that government does have a key part in helping out the innovation ecosystem, whether that's through funding projects, job creation, export knowledge, and assistance there. But ultimately, industry has to help innovators get off the ground. They have to take on the risk, and I will go a little bit more into how Foresight does that shortly. So Foresight, like I said, we're Canada's largest clean tech venture accelerator, but we couldn't do it without this amazing ecosystem in Canada and even globally. So we have 1,500 national and global partners. We have over 400 private capital partners, 250 global EIRs and mentors that do help us help those 1,300 ventures. And we do so through our bread and butter, which has always been venture acceleration. We've done that, like I said, for 11 years. But what we're seeing is when you deal with 300 to 400 ventures every single year, what do they all need? A customer. So when industry isn't adopting these solutions, we see that brain drain. It goes down to the States. They have a very great environment. They have a larger population for all the pilots and testing out new technologies and adopting them. So we need to keep that going, and that is a huge part of where industry plays in this and the private sector investment here. And remember the 25,000 network connections that were on the last slide? We also happen to have a big affinity towards sharing the knowledge. So later in the presentation, I'm going to give you some QR codes. They're free reports. They're amazing. They'll save you hopefully hundreds of dollars, so stay tuned there. And ultimately, what Foresight does is we aim to impact these 6 elements to barriers to progress. So we do it through supporting tech ecosystems, mitigating risk tolerance, simplifying red tape barriers, which is really key here, and addressing budget constraints. So do so with investors, with flexible funding programs, and innovative funding programs, truly. And we couldn't do it without our Helix 5 model. So that is industry, academia, capital, and government, like I said, all while encapsulating Indigenous participation within each of those elements. So I'm going to share, I want everyone to remember this because this is really, really critical to what Foresight's doing these days, and I implore you to also try to do it in your everyday. It's working well. So Foresight is, like I said, national. We're across all different sectors, and before all of you math nerds go to do the addition here, I will save you from doing the math. To date, Foresight's ventures have raised $1.77 billion. So the sectors we are working in are mining, agriculture, obviously energy, power, water, built environment, and transportation. And I think I'm even missing one, but absolutely, if you're involved in any of those, usually what we find is that they do work together. So as much as I mentioned this as energy disruptors, where we work in energy, oftentimes it has to do with water. You have hydropower, right? So that's a lot of collaboration we work with, and we try to involve ecosystem players from different sectors and get them in touch with other ecosystem players who are trying to solve the same problem, just in separate silos. And we do so via a systems thinking approach. So we offer things like value chain mapping, financial and business case studies to help you sell your VP on a sustainability plan and show how you're going to fall behind your competitors if you're not engaging more sustainability and innovation in your operations. Because plot twist, if you're an engineer here, most of the engineering firms are doing that. So get in touch if you're not. But this is what I shared earlier. This is one of the value chain links to the venture to value chains. So we have mapped out reports in all these different sectors. Free of charge, please, if you're going to take anything away from today, save yourself, save your company hundreds of dollars in research, hundreds of hours. And we've mapped out all these sectors you can see in the blue. So if that's relevant to you, absolutely feel free to check that out. And one of the advantages, of being a nonprofit is that we have access to a lot of proprietary data from our ventures, but also other organizations. So we knowledge share, kind of like an in-kind scenario, and people give us their data that they haven't shared in public. So the bigger kind of consulting firms don't have access to that knowledge. So this is quite a new approach that you won't find if you do hire other consultants. And then here's business cases. So I'd love as well if this is of interest to you, of your company, we have written out these business cases of what it takes from start of a pilot, of a venture ideation, towards being fully enveloped into industry or into municipalities, whatever the end goal is of the solution. And this is particularly relevant for municipal players or, again, industrial partners to help understand what the ecosystem needs for support, for financing, what kind of rules and regulations you could expect might be possible barriers. And when you are looking to support the innovation ecosystem or looking to have a pilot to solve an operational problem, this is a really good asset for you to have a better idea about what kind of surprises are in store, because I assure you there will be plenty of surprises. And especially in Canada, as much as we have a lot of regulation, we also have many, many paths of what this regulation hurdles can take, whether that's financing, rules, health, safety, environmental. So many, many different ways to go wrong, so absolutely check these out. So for example, in the long-term energy storage Cleantech adoption business case, that is quite the title, we should talk about that. But we found that for sites that rely on diesel power generation, you can get an ROI with renewable energy in under 3 years. That's not a bad business case, right? And then, so yeah, absolutely. If you are interested in this, it can be as quick to get it engaged with your municipality, with your company, in a matter of months. So Foresight, we deal with many, many ventures. We can help you find a solution to your operational problem, whether that's building a fully compostable and yet waterproof plastic bag, finding many different vendors who might be able to problem solve, and then interacting that in your own network. So for example, working with your R&D teams, working with your research facilities and your manufacturing facilities to make sure that those technologies can actually be implemented. And this is my absolute favorite piece of the presentation right now, because it's something I've gotten really personally excited about, because it's a program that started out at Foresight. It was initially just kind of a theory concept about working with those Helix 5 partners. So bringing together government, regulators, industry, indigenous groups, and other nonprofits and ecosystem supporters at the same table. So what we do, and the BC Ensign team, is we have project managers, say, in transportation. And they'll go around and just have nice half-hour conversations with all the players in the field and just find out what's up. What are you doing? What are you trying to solve today? And after about 3 months, what we can do is anecdotally say, okay, those 5 different stakeholders are trying to solve the exact same problem, but they're all doing it very differently and in a silo. So for example, one player over here might not know yet that they're about to hit this regulation. They have no idea that what they think they've solved is actually illegal, right? So it's about getting those people together into the same Zoom room, keep it nice and simple, and saying, hey, do you all want to try to solve this problem? And what we have found is that, so again, it's a 3-year project. We've only done 2 years, and I'd love to share some stats with you. So out of 29 projects, 15 have included Indigenous participation. Revenue growth has already exceeded expectations. So we've overachieved by 114%, attracting $62.6 million. Again, just in BC. We've created 332 jobs, green jobs, going over our target, overachieving by 138%. And on the topic of economic activity, export sales growth have already reached $21.3 million. And overall, we've attracted private sector investment over $66 million. And the kicker is, we've only done this with 7 full-time employees. That is why I'm so passionate about this. It's a defined working model. I implore you all to try it out at your work. Get involved. Get in touch with someone at this conference you've met. You don't exactly see how you work together, but you've understood you do have the same problem. Set a follow-up call. Get in conversation. So to finish here, I want to share a case study of a project we did with Imperial Oil. So as everyone probably understands here, all the oil and gas companies are actually very innovative. They've been trying to better the environment for many, many years now. And one of said products was I'll just keep it very high level, but it did use novel water technology, we'll just say. So ultimately, the benefits, and these are extremely conservative numbers, but they have reduced 14 swimming pools of water usage per year. So as those of you who live in Calgary, I think we can all appreciate with the recent water restrictions, that would have been lovely to keep in the system. So we're glad we could have helped. And then per year as well, they've also reduced the equivalent of 48,000 cars on the road per year through one innovation challenge. So that is just something that we can do together. But again, if you can take away anything from this conversation, please collaborate, cooperate, and let's get out there and make good things happen. Thank you.